Let's go Ravens! The temperature around Baltimore is rising again, and this time the conversation is not about a new play, not about a practice clip, and not about some random offseason noise. This is about Lamar Jackson, his future with the Ravens, and one of the most tired narratives that keeps coming back no matter how many times it should already be finished. And Ravens fans, before we get deep into this, make sure you have already hit the like button only if you are truly a Baltimore Ravens fan. And if possible, comment something like, "Go Ravens! In 2026, we'll come back stronger." Now let's get straight to the point, because former Ravens linebacker Bart stepped into a national conversation and pushed back hard on a take that has been following Lamar Jackson for years. The question being discussed was simple, but loaded. If someone said this could be Lamar Jackson's last season playing for the Baltimore Ravens, would that be an overreaction? That was the spark. And from there, the conversation went exactly where Ravens fans probably expected it to go. Dan Graziano opened the discussion by saying it was not necessarily an overreaction, because Lamar has 2 years left on his contract. The team had a stated goal of getting an extension done this offseason, and so far, that has not happened. He explained that until Lamar signs an extension, people will continue to question how long he is going to be in Baltimore. He also made it clear that if Lamar signs an extension, the entire discussion goes away. But until then, that question remains out there. And that is where Bart came in with a very strong response. Bart made it clear that, in his view, there is no way the Ravens allow the greatest quarterback in franchise history to just walk out the door. His point was about what it means to have a superstar quarterback. When a team has that kind of player, it always has a chance to be in playoff contention and always has a chance to win. That was the heart of Bart's argument. He was not buying the idea that this is some simple countdown toward Lamar leaving Baltimore. But then Mike Tannenbaum took the conversation in another direction. He brought up the fact that Lamar Jackson does not have an agent. He said that, from his experience as a general manager, he hated when players did not have agents, because agents play what he described as a very necessary role. His argument was that if the Ravens wanted to get a deal done and it still has not happened, Lamar not having an agent becomes an important part of the situation. And that is exactly the part Bart pushed back against. Bart's answer was direct. The market sets the price. He explained that Lamar has every reason to wait, because another quarterback extension could push the guaranteed money up and change the structure of the market. In Bart's view, why would Lamar rush into a contract early when he knows he has leverage? His cap number puts pressure on the team, and that pressure can bring the Ravens back to the table with a sweeter offer. That is the point Ravens fans need to understand here. This is not necessarily about confusion. It is not necessarily about broken communication. It is not automatically a crisis just because Lamar does not have an agent. The argument being made in the discussion was that Lamar already negotiated what was, at the time, the richest contract in NFL history without an agent. So the idea that he suddenly cannot handle this process does not line up with what has already happened. The concern from a team side is understandable in one specific way. When there is no agent, the team is not speaking through a middleman. The team may have to communicate directly with Lamar about the structure, the money, the timing, and whatever reasons exist for why a deal has or has not come together. That can make conversations different. It can make the process less traditional. But different does not automatically mean broken. And that is why this agent narrative feels so worn out. Lamar not having an agent is not new information. This is not some shocking detail that suddenly appeared this offseason. Everyone has known this. And yet, whenever there is a delay or a negotiation question, that same point gets pulled back into the spotlight as if it explains everything. Bart response basically reminded people that leverage, timing, and market movement matter just as much, if not more. There was also another important part of the discussion. The idea was raised that Lamar may simply be waiting. The reasoning presented was that his value may not be at its highest right now because he had what was described as a down year, with multiple factors mentioned, including injuries, offensive line play, and a weird year overall for him and the Ravens. If Lamar believes he can have a better season, then waiting could help him. And with other quarterback deals potentially affecting the market, every major contract that comes before his next extension can matter. That is where the conversation gets bigger than just Baltimore wanting a deal. Of course the Ravens would love clarity. Of course fans would love to wake up and see that Lamar Jackson has signed an extension. But this is a negotiation. It takes two sides. The Ravens wanting something does not mean Lamar has to accept the timing or the structure immediately. Bart point was that Lamar has leverage, and when a player has leverage, using it is part of the business. Another detail that came up is that there is no franchise tag option here, because Lamar Jackson has a no-tag clause in his contract. So the timeline is not built around the team simply tagging him later. That makes the extension question even more important, but it does not automatically mean the relationship is in danger. In fact, the discussion also included the belief that there has been no messaging from Lamar suggesting he wants out of Baltimore. That matters a lot. The expectation shared in the conversation was that Lamar may not sign a deal this offseason and could wait until after the season. There was even a projection that if something gets done, it could happen in the window after the season and before free agency, especially because Lamar and Eric DeCosta have made it clear they do not negotiate during the season. That creates a tight timeline, but it also gives a possible explanation for why nothing has happened yet. And there was another interesting point. If the Ravens do get an extension done with someone sooner, the belief expressed was that it may be more likely to be Zay Flowers than Lamar Jackson. Not because Lamar is leaving, not because the Ravens are giving up, but because the order of operations may simply point that way. Zay first, Lamar after the season. That was presented as the more realistic sequence. So when you put all of this together, the real story is not panic. The real story is patience, leverage, and another national conversation trying to turn Lamar's contract process into something bigger than it may actually be. Bart Scott saw that angle, and he shut it down. He pushed back against the idea that Lamar not having an agent should be used as a negative. He pushed back against the idea that the Ravens would simply let a player like Lamar walk away. And he reminded everyone that negotiations are about timing, pressure, and market value. And that is where the conversation turns from Lamar Jackson's contract situation into something just as important for Ravens fans, what the landscape around Baltimore looks like heading into 2026. Because after Bart Scott pushed back on that tired Lamar narrative, the discussion moved into competitor trends that may actually favor the Ravens. And when you look at the teams being discussed, the tone becomes pretty clear. Baltimore has questions, yes, but some of the teams standing in its way have questions of their own. The first major focus was Pittsburgh, and this part matters because the Steelers were brought up through the lens of their wide receiver room. Warren Sharp had ranked that group as AD, and apparently Steelers fans did not take that very well. But the explanation behind the grade was not random. The argument was that a backup running back led Pittsburgh in receptions last year. Their team MVP is no longer on the roster. They had only one player in the top 100 in open score. Only one wide receiver with 35 or more receptions, and receivers caught just 41% of passes thrown 10 or more yards. On top of that, 31% of their receptions went to a running back, which was the second most. That is not a small concern. That is a major offensive question. And when the conversation turned toward what Pittsburgh added, the point was that Michael Pittman could help underneath and could pair well with Aaron Rodgers in that regard. But the belief was that this alone is not enough to suddenly make that unit average. Jeremy Bernard was also mentioned, but the conversation did not go too far in projecting him as a guaranteed fix. That is not a small concern. That is a major offensive question. And when the conversation turned toward what Pittsburgh added, the point was that Michael Pittman could help underneath and could pair well with Aaron Rodgers in that regard. But the belief was that this alone is not enough to suddenly make that unit average. Jeremy Bernard was also mentioned, but the conversation did not go too far in projecting him as a guaranteed fix.